Hello and welcome to the Adopt 365 podcast. My name is Barry Coombs and today I will be joined by Megan Warren and Anthony Charman.
Hi there.
Today we're going to be talking about the recent Microsoft Ignite conference. About 100,000 attendees were brought together online, sadly, due to the continued coronavirus pandemic between March the 2nd and March the 4th. Over the last 12 months, we've seen a massive shift in the way that we've worked, we've lived our lives, and undoubtedly technology has led the way as we adapt and change to these ever-changing times at the moment. And for me and my co-hosts, I'm sure, Microsoft have been a real leader, not only in making sure we had the technology available at the start, but changing their strategy and making sure that we have the tools available to us moving forward. On today's podcast, we will discuss what we thought of Microsoft Ignite, the announcement that we saw, and we're going to be concentrating mainly on Microsoft Teams. But before we get started, I thought it would be really interesting to hear about the changes in the technology that we use within Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 and how it's changed, how it's adapted over the last 12 months based upon the work that we do with it. So, Anthony, over to you first. What changes in Microsoft 365 have been most apparent to you in the work that you do at Computer World?
Yeah, so I think if I think back to 12 months ago, we were just going into lockdown, and we've been using Teams as an organization for quite a while, but there were clearly limitations in that. If I think about the three things that have really improved and have changed my life that I'll use every day, I would think the first one is the fact we can now pop out everything. We can pop out channels, we can pop out applications. We used to be in that situation where you had your Teams client open on your desktop, and every time you moved to a document in there, you had to then go back to the chat. Now that the fact that I can pop out those windows onto other screens makes it a lot more easy to use. So that's my number one kind of real change that's gone through. The kind of intranet Yammer integration that we're seeing, and especially as that's been enhanced with Viva Connections, is another one where I can, we're starting to bring information into people's Teams client from their intranet. That's a very significant move forward. And then my favorite app, which is Tasks by Planner and To Do. And the ability now to be able to manage tasks that are allocated to me from multiple planners in one place, alongside the tasks that I've created myself. And I just love the feature that if I can underline anything in an email and hit the create a task option, that drops into my to-do list. That's really changed the way in which I've worked now, and has been the real driver behind me getting away from endless paper for managing what I do into committing to doing that within the Teams environment.
Some fantastic features there, and one of the things that I most love about this technology and working with this is every person you speak to, this will be different. So Megan, from your perspective over the last 12 months, obviously very much involved with Microsoft 365, what have been the biggest changes that have kind of helped you or the customers you've been dealing with?
So one of the biggest things that I've been working with recently in a few different use cases is Microsoft Bookings. And I think before the pandemic, I didn't really see the use case for it all that much. But as people have had to change, obviously, things like stores can't be open, people can't go and visit you. People have had to change the way that they work and how they interact with their clients and how they interact with each other. I've seen Bookings is a really good use case for that, to make sure that it's very easy for someone like a customer to book your time, going through to then Teams meetings and then actually conducting meetings. It's just a really slick process doing that through Bookings into Teams meetings. So I've done a lot with Bookings recently. And then I think the other thing that I'd probably say is everybody's mindset seems to have changed around the well-being aspect of it. Everyone seems to be taking a lot more serious focus on this, a bit of a more serious view on this, and actually caring about their own well-being and their colleagues. So the stuff that people are actually taking notice of are the things like their focus time through My Analytics and how many quiet days they've had as well. And for me as a mental health first aider, that's amazing to see people actually taking an interest and caring about their well-being as well. So yeah, I'd probably say My Analytics and Microsoft Bookings were mine.
Yeah, definitely. I think Microsoft Booking's an interesting one, because I think before all of this, before lockdown, there was certainly a lot of smaller businesses that were leveraging bookings. If you're a one-to-one coach or consultant and you're using Office 365, and in fact, Microsoft, I think, only made it available in those very small business packages initially, kind of thing. But as the demand has changed for remote booking and things like that, it filtered through to E3 and E5 and all of those. And we're now finding new and interesting ways to engage on it. And certainly I know, Megan, that you've engaged in two very different projects with that so far. I think for me, the main things that I've seen come out and have matured, and certainly Mark, one of the people that's part of our champions community that we invite before these podcasts to kind of just get the latest update as to where they are. Microsoft Lists is probably my favorite feature. It's something where if you don't have a main business system available for storage of data and you're needing to track a flow of data through an organization, if used the correct way and if working with the business the correct way, Microsoft Lists can be that real niche product that lets you create something yourself. Not quite part of the Power Platform and the citizen developer part of it that Microsoft talk about, but for me, it's on the edge of that kind of thing. Let's understand what we need. Let's understand what we track. Let's understand the inputs and the outputs. And certainly the latest features I've seen with that, with the ability to quickly and easily create rules to alert people when things are changed, if things people happen, are really, really important. And then certainly, Megan, to echo your point there, so Viva Insights. So Ian, again, part of the champions community, we were talking about how the organization that Ian works for is embracing that kind of well-being and looking after each other inside your organizations, which is such an important aspect that we all need to be looking at. And I think we can all probably relate in our personal lives and the impact that lockdown has had on us. I certainly know from my side, at certain times with the stresses of the change and the different environments, I felt, gosh, I need to reassess what I'm doing, where I'm spending my time. Am I having that virtual commute that they're bringing into it in some other way, going outside, forcing myself to get my steps up? So the fact that Microsoft are really taking employee experience, employee well-being seriously, for me is absolutely fantastic. And to lead the way, being such a large organization, I think is so important. So a wealth of changes happening there. We're seeing a number of features coming in to Microsoft Teams over the next month, mainly being driven by Microsoft Ignite. So why don't we use this as a good point to kind of pivot the conversation onto the main subject for today and onto Microsoft Ignite. So first of all, I wanted to highlight to anyone that is watching the podcast, if it's on YouTube, or listening in to it from any of the podcast apps, there are a number of fantastic resources available to you if you're wanting to get up to speed with Microsoft Ignite. And one of the fantastic things with these conferences that have happened from the change over the coronavirus period is previously you'd have to pay for a very large ticket. You'd be flown over to Florida or somewhere like that in the United States, which clearly is lovely, and certainly we all miss the community aspect, but it had a large barrier to entry. You had to have a significant reason, whereas now these conferences, at the moment at least, are free online and they can be watched on demand. The vast amount of content can be gone and found. Now, for me, there's two resources that I'd recommend people go in and look for. One is the Book of News. If you Google Book of News, Microsoft Ignite 2021, it gives you the lowdown about every single announcement that happened at Microsoft Ignite. And the second one for me, if you are more focused in Microsoft Teams content, there was a brilliant session by a lady called Nicole Hershkowitz, who I think is a general manager for Teams or something like that at Microsoft. I will put the details into the description of this video or the podcast so you can go and watch it. And for me, it was a no nonsense. Let's talk about each feature, what it means and where you can go out and find more. And it was a fantastic session. So Anthony, I suppose over to you first. Let's go for the keynote. Very different keynote compared to previous Ignite keynotes I've seen. What were your thoughts? You're muted, Anthony.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I decided to join it via the AltSpace VR environment. So I was in that 3D kind of Minecraft type environment. I was able to wander down the corridor and join the session there, and that's quite amusing. But then when I started to watch the content, there was some good stuff announced. The stuff around mesh was very interesting to start with. I think I got a little bit confused in the middle of it when you'd got 3 or 4 people stood around a campfire at a festival, and it's only since then that I've kind of been able to think about that in more detail and think about how useful that's going to be. There was a big kind of focus on the use of HoloLens to provide augmented reality in business situations. So that was quite interesting, and I can remember seeing an example of that a couple of years ago, where they were in the Land Rover factory, overlaying the wiring diagram onto a Land Rover, and thinking, that's really useful. I'm not sure when I'm going to find that first opportunity to implement that within one of our clients, but it's good to see that kind of thing going on, and I think that will change the way in which people work.
Definitely, and that was a big impact for me. That initial keynote, we're used to Satya Nadella talking about the change that has happened, talking about how Microsoft are delivering that change and almost announcing some of the key features. But very much there was some of that at the beginning, but the focus really was on this mesh technology, this kind of the ability to have a second world or be connected with the world in a different place with augmented reality, or as Microsoft call it, this mixed reality kind of thing. As you say, it's when we're going to see these things, there's a barrier to entry at the moment in terms of the cost of some of the units. I think before this, we were talking about it in the champions community. I think there's still £3,000 plus cost to get one single HoloLens device. But those use cases, I think you mentioned the Jaguar Land Rover factory there, Anthony. If you have a use case that is detrimental, then the cost for moving people to a specific challenge is not capable, then today is potentially, it is available to be utilized. Until it goes mass market, I'm not quite sure. I don't know, Megan, what your thoughts are on to when we're going to be all sat there with AR glasses on.
Do you know what? When you were watching the videos and the one that was during the keynote, it definitely felt like some of those movies that you watch, and it just feels like it's so far in the future that actually the fact that it is actually possible today, it blows my mind that can be done today. But I remember when I went to VMworld, it was probably in 2019. There was one of the teams there that were working on the augmented reality stuff, and I tried it out. I had the HoloLens on. And I was actually building a server, but what was great was you had all the parts in front of you. They were all laid out on the table. It showed you which piece to pick up, and it had the instructions that you read on it as well. And as you picked it up, it then told you what to do with it. So it knew that you'd picked that bit up. It then told you to like flip it over, which bit, and it showed you where to put it in the server as well. And for someone who's starting off quite early with that sort of stuff, for it to be able to tell you what to do without having that person there to hold your hand and show you that it's all built into this technology was incredible. So I can see how it can be used. Not 100% sure now in other use cases, but that was definitely a use case that could be used today.
I think it was really quite interesting, and as much as it may seem like light years away to us, Microsoft weren't just talking about this as a conceptual idea kind of thing. They are delivering platforms that are able to consume this today with the HoloLens 2 device, but they're also wanting to allow it to be consumed in various different devices, whether that is a VR headset rather than an AR headset, whether that's with your mobile phone. Really interesting to see the developers of Pokemon Go out there talking about how this technology could be leveraged in different worlds, or even your standard device, and certainly there is some of those components that are already available for people to have a look at today and see how they're consuming. Microsoft have got a Microsoft Mesh app preview for those of you that are lucky enough to have HoloLens devices for you to go and have a look at there, as well as it kind of starting to come to fruition in a few areas. There was a real interesting demonstration with it being utilized in a meeting with lots of engineering type folk. then putting a model in into the space, and there's this concept of spaces and spatial reality. Them not only being able to spin the device around, but draw on arrows and components inside this diagram as they were looking at it. But one of the most impressive things is if a month later you want to continue that conversation, you jump straight back into that space, into that meeting room, physical meeting room, virtual meeting room, and the object is in exactly the same state, exploded apart with your arrows on it. So it is able to maintain that kind of position, irrespective of time and space and things like that. So certainly very interesting, but yeah, very much with you on there, Anthony. It kind of, they were looking for a way to connect to the audience, and I did lose the business practicality towards the end there with Circus du Soleil and the dancing around the campfire at the end.
Yeah, but if you think about it, we've actually implemented a kind of a rudimental solution around that for one of our clients recently, in that people can book a virtual appointment and be taken round a store. In this case, it's a tile store, and shown tiles, and the operative can pick 2 tiles up and show what they look like together, and that kind of thing. And we're just using an iPad as a mechanism to do that at the moment, but it's the basics of that fundamental kind of functionality. So yeah, I'm sure we will find the use cases for this technology, and I'm sure it'll be sooner rather than later.
Definitely. So really quite exciting technologies. Doesn't feel like quite ready for mass market, but certainly ready for these niche use cases. And I certainly can't wait for the day that I can get my HoloLens free or whatever it will be, and be joining these things. I'm a big fan of AltSpace VR, and I've done a few conferences and things like that there. But let's transition a little bit to the today, into the here and now, the things that people are consuming already. And Megan, you got quite a focus obviously on Microsoft Teams and meetings specifically. So what were some of the things that really stood out to you of the very many things that were announced with regard to meetings at Ignite?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important that Microsoft have put so much effort into improving the meeting experiences that we're all going through at the moment, because we are spending so much time in these meetings. So some of the things that really stood out to me were the different views that they're providing us now, and that they're starting to roll out in things like the presenter view and the dynamic view, that you can actually change the way that you're viewing that meeting. As I said, we're all spending so much time in these meetings now, that actually the way that we're seeing them may not be the best way for us to consume them. So now when they're doing this, they're allowing you to have the presentation on screen, and rather than having you in the corner down below, so if someone wants to see you and the presentation, it's really difficult, they're actually doing it where they almost superimpose you in front of the presentation, and it actually brings that together. So it shows how you're presenting that, like you would do at a conference. If you were presenting something, you'd have the screen behind you, and you'd be stood in front of it, and you can consume both the person and the content at the same time. So that was really good. I'm really excited to see that, and how you can choose the view that works for you as such.
I really like that idea of having that choice kind of thing, because I think the one you described there, kind of being superimposed on top of it, reminded me a little bit of being a weatherman kind of thing, and pointing around saying there's some cloud coming in from the east and things like that. I think there are definitely scenarios where that is the best view, but I really liked, I think it was the side-by-side view, where it looks a little bit like maybe a news presenter in the morning, where you've got the kind of the real interesting statistics that you're reporting upon, and you're in your own space, but equally as an important part of the content that you are talking about there.
I think you're definitely right there. You say you like that version. I definitely like the one where you're superimposed. So like you say, giving people the choice, allowing them to see the way that it works for them, is definitely the right way to go about it.
Yeah, and what I like is the actual presenter view of, as if you're making the presentation, the fact you can have your notes there, you can still have eye contact with a gallery of people along the top of the screen now. I think that's where it's going, so that you're closer to the eye line of the camera, and you've got your slides, and you can see what you're presenting at the moment, but also see what's coming next. So yeah, I think there are benefits to all of those options.
Definitely. And some of the features that were spoken about, I think that Megan, you've started to even see come live already, haven't you, with certainly some of those features?
Yeah, definitely. I can see you guys smiling on this camera. I don't think I've ever been so excited for some features to come out as I was for especially the live transcription. So this is something I've seen rolling out in the past week or so. So it is coming. If you haven't got it yet, it should be with you soon. But I just feel it's really simplified and enhanced the productivity that people can have during meetings. So now if you go into Teams, when you click the more options button on the top bar, you should be able to go down to start transcription. For me, that's just massive. It makes it so much easier because when we're doing training with customers, when we're talking to clients about how meetings work within Teams, the questions we always come up against are, one, can you transcribe? And there used to be a way to work around it. We used to be able to upload it to Stream, choose to have the transcription auto-processed, but it wasn't automatic. You still had to go and do those steps and then go into Stream to find it. Now it does it against the meeting. And it means that people can have less worry about taking those meeting minutes because they know it's going to be in the transcription. And it just means that you can find it very easily within the meeting details in Teams afterwards as well. So it's such a simple thing. It's not like the biggest revelation in the world, but I think it's going to make such a massive difference to everybody's experience within Teams meetings. So that was one of them. And another one that I love was the ability to download the attendance report, which is happening and rolling out across Teams already as well. Just because if you want to know who was there, what time they joined, how long they were on the call for, it's something, again, so simple, but you can download that as soon as the meeting's finished and get an attendance report. But that live transcription, I'm super excited to tell everybody in the world about it if I could.
I think there's what was really quite interesting to me is how they're looking to bring these technologies from not only available to us on a one-to-one basis. So at the end of the day, if Microsoft is able to figure out that it's Barry talking because I'm using the computer in front of me and I'm logged in as me, the intelligent transcription at that point is really important. It is great that it's there, but actually from a technological perspective, it's quite simple for them to implement kind of thing. Once you can do a bit of text to speech, once you know who is saying it, it's easy to attribute that as you go along. For me, what was really, really important was the fact they're looking to bring these technologies into the boardroom. So they've announced a set of intelligent, they call it speaker devices, but clearly have microphone arrays in them as well, that will allow you to be able to see what is going on and who is saying what, where the transcription is coming from inside your meeting rooms, as well as just those people that are remote as well. And for me, that was certainly a really interesting point where this technology that is going to be ever so helpful while we're all at home can also be as helpful when we're in the hybrid world as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I think as well, if you ask Anthony, when we were on calls with customers, the question we always get is, how well will it pick up this accent? So we work with a lot of Welsh customers. How well will it pick up my accent? I'm Irish. How does it work? And actually, when you watch the live transcription recently, it's very accurate. I feel like Microsoft have put in a lot of work to make sure the accuracy is there. And I feel like it's come on a long way. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Anthony.
Well, I was watching it on a meeting earlier today, and there was a chap who kept butting in, but it was incredibly clever in that it just was ignoring him. It was stacking up. It was continuing with the conversation I was having with them in a paragraph, and it was just kind of storing up his what he was trying to say at the bottom. And then as soon as I stopped speaking, it let all of that, it sorted out what was worthy of what he'd been saying and put it in. So it's incredibly sophisticated. And Megan and I were on the phone the other day to a guy with quite a thick foreign accent. And it was far better at interpreting what he was saying than we were in a number of cases. So yeah, it's very, very clever stuff going on in there. It's the real power of the AI that they've got within the Microsoft portfolio that's doing that.
Definitely. And Anthony, one of the things that I was really interested to hear spoken about a bit more was the webinar functionality. Do you want to give us a little bit more insight into that?
Yeah. Well, if I think back to this time last year, the most common issue we had when we were talking to people about meetings in Microsoft Teams was, I can do so much more in Zoom. I can have so many more people on the screen in Zoom. I can organize and manage my attendees better in Zoom. And I think Microsoft, it's just very clear that Microsoft took that very seriously. And as the year has gone on, as the last 12 months has gone on, we've seen so much more being added into the Teams meeting environment. I think we've got the up to 99 people on the screen at one time. We're now able to take a lot more control of the meeting. We've got the ability to lock meetings so that once the meeting has started, we can stop anyone else joining into that meeting. And also, we've now got the ability to manage whole webinars, or this is just starting, where we'll be able to manage the registration for webinar-based meetings online, and that's very sophisticated and very simple to set up, so people can come and register for a virtual event and then attend that virtual event. 1,000 people in there can interact, and 20,000 people is what is the limit, I believe, at the moment on view-only broadcasts, and it will automatically know when it reaches those thresholds. So it will move you to, once the 1,000th and first person joins in, then it moves it to the view-only mode to make the most of bandwidth and to make it more manageable.
I think Microsoft are temporarily allowing up to 20,000 people in a webinar, which is certainly very impressive, but much needed for some of the use cases, I'm sure. But they have iterated that is temporary during this remote working environment. They're going to up that limit, a bit of kind of initial adoption, and then they are planning to settle that back down to 10,000. But as you say, it's that intelligence between 1,000 and 10,000 where it switches from a kind of more interactive to a more kind of one way.
Yeah, and of course, having so many people on a meeting like that, you need some help with the moderation of it and the management of it. You don't want one of those 20,000 people to have their dog barking in the background and that affecting the meeting. So they've put some really good tools in place to enable us to moderate the chat on those meetings, but also manage video and sound. So yeah, that's probably it's a very significant area. We've got a client who wants to organise their awards ceremony across the organisation at the moment, and it's quite a big organisation. And we've spoken to them about doing that, and it's just fairly straightforward, run-of-the-mill configuration now within Teams. Whereas this time last year, that would have been a real challenge to the Teams environment. So yeah.
I think as well, for someone who's in a marketing role as well, the fact that we were doing things like Microsoft 365 webinars on Zoom never used to make sense. So this is something I've been waiting for, and will actually make sense to do a Microsoft 365 webinar in Microsoft Teams when it is available as well.
Definitely, it's really good to see that maturity, and it's not just the fact that live events has been tweaked. It is that full end-to-end experience, the ability to create a custom sign-up page. I do think the ability to customize those sign-up pages and things like that, it seems to be a little bit more restrictive over than what is available with like GoTo or Zoom at the moment. I don't think there's going to be much co-branding capability in the initial days. It is just going to be a team sign-up page, but it is there, and it is also available, as I understand it, to anyone that has a Teams license. So it's not going to have to be an additional cost, which a lot of these other platforms are, an additional cost to be able to go and do these things. And as you say, then you've got the full attendance reporting and things like that as well. One of the things that I thought was really quite interesting as part of this was the ability to be able to feed into Microsoft Dynamics as part of this. So you've got your webinar going on, but then if you are using Dynamics for marketing and sales activity, you're able to then update your attendee reports and things like that backwards and forwards into Dynamics, which certainly would be very important for marketing teams. So as we come away from any other sort of meeting functionality that anyone has seen that you want to talk about now, or should we segue into some of the other technologies?
I think that's it for meetings. It's it is probably the area that's developed the most within Teams over the last 12 months, and just that level of sophistication it's got now means that we're not looking at other products to deliver those meetings, whatever the size. Definitely.
So Megan, kind of related to meetings, but equally can be completely separate. Microsoft Whiteboard is something that you're a big fan of. There's some announcements around there and some updates we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. So we love Whiteboard at Computer World, especially when we can be around a real whiteboard. But and what I would say is I feel like it's one of the applications that a lot of people underestimate, especially when you're using the full app view rather than just through a meeting, purely because you can do things like it's got templates in there, etc., for meeting planning and stuff like that. So I definitely recommend everybody checks out the full app version of Microsoft Whiteboard if they haven't. But there's some new things coming there, which allows it to be more inclusive for everybody, because obviously inclusivity for everybody is a major thing that we need to do. So if you don't have an device with a pen, so you can't scribble, etc., they're bringing things like more shapes to Whiteboard, which it sounds like such a simple thing, but actually for those people who aren't able to use a pen, etc., will make the world of difference for them. And also, one of the big things is when you all collaborate on a whiteboard, it doesn't tell you who's contributed what to the whiteboard. That is coming now, so you can see the attribution and the contribution against the different parts of the whiteboard. So they're just little things, like I say again, that are coming, but are going to make it a lot more productive and a lot more inclusive for everybody to use that whiteboard when you're collaborating with people.
Definitely. And one of the things that I've seen in the last few days, but I think it's been talked about for a while now, is you can now effectively, I think there's been a few hacks around doing this before, but you can now do it in a fully supported fashion. Go into one of your team channels that you're using. So maybe it's the channel we use to plan this podcast every month, and you can add a whiteboard there as a tab. So previously people have gone into Whiteboard, created a sharing link, added a website, added that in there as a kind of workaround to get it working, but it wasn't ideal. Now you can natively add a whiteboard as a tab and have it persistent. So if you just want something that you and the team constantly scribble over your ideas and stuff like that and build it out, you can now do that quite quickly and quite easily.
I think if you have an online meeting now and you use a whiteboard while you're in that meeting, then that gets tagged alongside the videos, and we've seen the videos now moved. Most people's videos will now be arriving in OneDrive rather than being created in Stream. So that video is accessible from the meeting chat. The transcript's available from there, and the whiteboard's available from there. So it's just bringing that whole meeting experience together. So it's very easy to go back and review what's happened in a meeting if you're not able to attend, or you want to go back and pick up some particular detail that you've not made in your notes or not remembered. So the whole meeting experience is now coming together very, very nicely.
Definitely. And another area then for me is the ability to be able to collaborate with people outside your organization. So we're probably all very much used to the ability to be able to add guests into your team, but then you have this kind of friction where if you're collaborating with people outside your organization, you have to switch into their tenants to be able to get your updates and see what's going on. Obviously a bit of clever notification management, you can make sure you're alerted in the right way. But Anthony, there was some features around Microsoft Teams Connect announced. Do you want to share those?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that Microsoft have been talking about for a while now, and I've been trying to work out how they're going to do it. Because we've always got this question of do I make a client an external person a guest, or do I keep them as an external user? And there's limitations on what they can do then. But what they've announced is really just to reveal the way they're going to do that. What they're going to do is through Microsoft Teams Connect, enable channels to be shared across tenants. I'd not even thought of that as an option. But what it will allow me to do is to go into my tenant in a team that I've owned and create a channel, and then share that channel. As you create the channel, it gives you the option: is it a public, is it a private, or is it a shared channel? And I can now share that channel with external people, and that channel will appear in their tenant, so they can fully communicate and collaborate on any content in there, see the general conversation that's going on there, the postings on that channel, and really participate in there, which is going to help me solve a problem with one of our clients where they have a lot of teaching coaches that work in schools and are members of the Microsoft kind of educational tenant within the school, but also need to participate in a third-party organizations channels. So I'm desperate to see that. It's in private preview at the moment. which means that it's very difficult to get your hands on. But Microsoft said it would be kind of rolled out later this year. So yeah, really very much looking forward to that and seeing what it is, because the way they've done it is just going to give us the ultimate in flexibility around communicating and collaborating across organizations, but within that secure umbrella that Teams provides. So yeah, I'm as excited about that as Megan was about transcripts. So
you two are definitely suffering from lockdown based upon your excitement, I can tell. So for me, as people know, Microsoft Viva is something that I was really pleased to hear about, as I've mentioned earlier on in this podcast. But as the announcement for Microsoft Viva came in February, there wasn't a large amount of updates that we were seeing at Ignite this year. It was mainly around kind of just announcing things are coming. You're going to be able to start seeing things. And I think it was shortly after Microsoft Ignite, we saw Viva Insights appear within our tenants. So if you go to the Teams App Store, search for Insights, you can now go and control some of those elements around Viva Insights, also known as My Analytics, inside Microsoft Teams, which is a lot better place for it to be on a day-to-day basis for you to be able to go and manage that. You will have also you'll see that in, I think it's in April, we're going to see things like the virtual commute, the headspace functionality coming into there as well as the expanded technology. But I don't think I've seen when this was announced or whatever, but for me, the ability for My Analytics, so Viva Insights, to be able to offer you delay delivery enabled. So this is when you're sending emails out of hours. Don't forget, just because you're working out of hours doesn't mean that your colleague wants to. What's the effect on that communication going to be to them? Viva Insights or My Analytics is able to pop up little warnings and go, look, it's out of hours. Do you really want to go and do that? Should we not delay that send? So anyone that's currently using My Analytics, just come into it, have a look in your settings. And if anyone that is watching the video, you can see it will be in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. You simply enable that. That only works with the Outlook Windows client at the moment. So for me, I'm a 100% web user. So it's not that useful for me at the moment, but it's good to see those features and functionalities coming. And I'm really excited about what we are seeing around Viva. I've recently done a blog series all around Microsoft Viva topics. So this is the ability to be able to track topics, kind of like a Wikipedia inside your business. And I've recently done a large piece of work on looking at how its use case it is, what should be the experience inside an organization and how it should be used. So if anyone is looking at Viva topics and wants to get a bit more of an insight into that, head over to definetomorrow.co.uk and you'll be able to see some of the announcements around that. I think one of the final areas as we kind of get towards the end of the podcast is the ability to be able to look at some of the security features. And we reserve this podcast mainly for kind of the champions of 365. So we don't want to get down into that nitty gritty. But for me, of all of the keynotes during the 3-day conference, the security keynote just had announcement upon announcement of really important features and functionalities that are going to be ever important to us as we move forward. So there was lots of stuff there about passwordless authentication in Azure AD with things like FIDO tokens. So making this easier so people don't have to remember a large amount of passwords. Microsoft expanding Sentinel to be able to integrate with far more systems. Undoubtedly, Microsoft are wanting to be a standout security company, providing the right solutions and not just being an enabler to a whole security industry. So it was really good to be able to see this, but they are also integrating other technologies. Things like DLP will be available in Chrome. The Azure Purview will be able to look at and help you classify data that is stored into AWS S3. So for me, this is really seeing that coming to fruition of Satya Nadella's we're an enabler to everyone in the technology. We're no longer Microsoft who hate these other people. We're Microsoft that leads the way, but we also want to work with the community. We love Linux. We love all these other platforms that they've got over the way. And I think to bring it back to Microsoft Teams and the other technologies, we've now seen encrypted calling is going to become available for one-to-one calls inside Microsoft Teams. So these are use cases inside your organization where it's maybe a support administrator, Anthony, talking to you, wanting to give you a password for a system you've got to log into. This is an example Microsoft gave, not mine. I don't know if this is the most secure way of doing it, but anyway, the call would be encrypted. You can sit back and relax. No one else is able to watch this, and it's an encrypted end-to-end call between me and Anthony. Now they're looking to bring that out into other use cases in the future. So we've gone through a lot of stuff there. Any other kind of final thoughts around Microsoft Ignite? I
think back to the security piece, one of the questions I get when I'm talking to organizations is, and showing them what's possible within Teams is they'll say, well, Planner's very nice, but we're using a third-party product for that at the moment. And one of the things I always remind them is that, all of the Microsoft products within the Teams portfolio fall under the umbrella of the security solutions that are provided by Microsoft. So your DLP piece is very simple. When it comes down to Azure information protection, and all of your sensitivity labels will be respected within the Microsoft applications, and that often is a bit of a game changer because they do want to keep things, be able to monitor things from one place from a security point of view. And as Barry said, with Sentinel having a lot of external connections added to it, so it can monitor third-party pieces. That kind of will bring in a lot more market for that. But yes, I think security is important. We always have to just think about that as the base level of everything we do when we're implementing Teams, and Microsoft have been very helpful in that with some of the new announcements.
Definitely. So thank you ever so much, Megan and Anthony, but also to our community champions, Ian, Mark, that have joined us before this call. If you are a Microsoft 365 champion or a IT manager that really wants to get stuck in and is loving the Microsoft 365 technologies, feel free to message Anthony, Megan, or myself to join us on that champions community that we do for 30 minutes before every podcast that we record. The next podcast, we're hoping to have a special guest from Microsoft to join us all around the future of work, about hybrid working, about community, and about company culture. So thank you ever so much for joining us on the Adopt 365 podcast. Computer World have a number of events coming up soon, so check out computerworld.co.uk/events. One of those is all about data protection, and the other one is all around Microsoft 365. So feel free to go and view those and sign up where relevant. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and we look forward to catching you on